So first off, thank you everyone for attending. As the title suggests, we'll be looking at how to craft high-impact Google search campaigns. Now, a lot of what we see on the day-to-day in audits and across all of the search campaigns that we manage, some pitfalls to avoid, common mistakes, different things like that. But again, my name is Anthony. I'm a marketing strategy director here at Metadata. I've been running paid media campaigns for nearly a decade now. I've spent close to $60 million through Google search and various campaign types: display, video, PMAX, demand gen. And really what we'll be focusing on though today is our search campaign. So one other piece here is next week. Don't forget to register for our Demand 2024 event, which is on October 23rd. A lot of really great information, keynote speakers, and everything will be tagged accordingly that you can save so that you can attend the sessions that are related to what you're wanting to see. So let's jump in. This is so we'll be going through just kind of the foundational build, putting those pieces together, and then maintaining those campaigns. So to start us off, it seems like more times than not, as paid media marketers, we hear this a lot, right? We want good quality leads, and we want a lot of them. If only it were as easy as just pushing the button and having all of those leads flow in high quality. We're closing $1 million deals left and right. If only it were that easy. But really, it kind of goes back to the why, right? Why are we doing what we're doing? Yes, we have substantial marketing budgets. We have goals and overarching KPIs that the business needs to achieve. But ultimately, taking that first step back before we even begin doing research or determining what keywords we want to bid on and landing pages we want to deploy. But really, in my opinion, the trick of any search campaign is intent versus volume. Do we want very high intent, potentially low volume keywords? Or do we want to go after a huge amount of volume and a kind of spray and pray approach, if you will, to capture as much as we can, as quickly as we can, at the lowest CPC? This is really dependent upon, again, those overarching business objectives and ultimately, where is that pain and suffering, right? Does one product or service do really well over another? Is there one area that needs a little more help? Maybe we defer some budget there. But really just kind of taking that first step back and zooming out before we get into the weeds of, why are we doing what we're doing? One common mistake that we see time and time again is keywords designed for research. So things like metadata reviews, metadata alternatives, metadata competitors. While that has its place, when we think about the experience and say, okay, if I'm going to bid on insert brand name reviews or insert brand name alternatives, where am I going to send someone? Am I sending them to a demo request page? That's really where you have other channels to kind of pick those up, your review platforms, your SEO, your organic traffic, any blogs or specific resources that are ungated. Let those other channels do that heavy lifting so that this way, when the time comes for that high intent search to come through, you're able to fulfill that micro moment and complete the experience, which we'll jump into in a minute here. But one thing that we see a lot is paying for research, right? When we look at paid search as a whole, it's likely going to be some of our highest CPCs that we'll see, versus social, like on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn and things like that, unless you have a very niche and specific audience. But the direct response channel is going to cost you. The other piece here is your data sources. So again, before we start diving in and pulling levers and adding keywords and changing ads, do we have GA4 connected so that we can look at all of the different KPIs and pieces that come through? Same thing with conversion value, right? Is that set up? Do we know what what keywords are driving the most deals? Of course, you can just use metadata because it does that automatically. But if you're not, make sure you have all of your data sources buttoned up so that you can pull in that information to digest and make those actionable insights. Okay. The next piece here, as part of the foundational build, is understanding when to use which match types. Now, I think we can all relate to this one. Broad match is basically saying, hey, Google, go ahead and spend all of my money as quickly as you can. If you're not prepared to monitor negative keywords on a daily basis, you shouldn't be using broad match. Now, there are instances where we use broad match successfully, paired with even automated bidding. But the majority of the time, what we typically look to do is run phrase and exact, again, those high intent terms. And if you have a lot of volume, that will also help cut down on some irrelevant search terms using phrase. Phrase is typically a good go to because it's close enough to where it will serve for what we're looking for, but not so outlandish that it will start triggering ads for terms that are completely unrelated. And with the recent changes to negative keywords and adjusting for misspellings, I mean, there's even some accounts we've audited that still have broad match modifiers. So it's definitely a good practice, even on a bi-weekly basis, to really comb through your search terms, which we'll dive into in a minute, and just are we bidding on the right keywords? What does our impression share look like? Can we shift some budget somewhere else to kind of pick up more impressions to really help the rest of that campaign? Now, when we look at theming, this is another big one where it is case by case basis. But when we say what is a good theme of keywords that should trigger the same ad? Now, one example would be like B2B demand gen company, B2B demand gen services, B2B demand gen agency. Those are great themes that you would include in the same ad group. Something like B2B demand gen software, I would not include. Although it does have that common denominator, it is not related to the intent behind that search. So typically when you're mapping out your keywords and you're saying, okay, which go in which ad group, it's important to know that the ad that you're going to serve needs to be related to those keywords, even if it's something closely related. But that one keyword at the end, like software versus company, that's a huge differentiator. So again, another thing to just keep in mind there. Now, when we look at our budget, this is something else that we've seen time and time again is, stuff 100 keywords into a campaign that has a $200 a day budget. Well, that's going to throttle your campaigns and create a bottleneck and prevent the keywords that you want to have serve from serving. It's easy to just try and go after everything all at once, but you can very quickly spread yourself too thin, and then you end up having a few clicks a day because you have all these keywords trying to compete for the same budget. So it looks like we had just a quick question here. How would you scale branded keywords when search volume is low? Great question, and something we run into pretty frequently. So branded terms those are your money terms, right? Unless someone is conquesting, or you want to show a strong brand presence, always keep those running. Now, the way around having low search volume is to lean on your non-branded terms and then even your competitor terms to siphon off some of that traffic. But that is the one challenge with search campaigns is if you're limited by volume, there's not really a whole lot that we can do there. But there are other avenues like opening up geos to different areas. If you offer services globally, if it's just national, then I would lean into more of the non-branded and competitor terms. But ultimately, we can't change that search volume. There's other pieces like social that you can lean into to help with some brand awareness to trigger those branded terms. Is what I would do to help with low search volume on branded terms. moving on. So now we're getting into the build, right? And here's an example that I pulled, just did a quick search to just showcase why the details matter. Now, I have the best CMS builder, right? What we see a lot of lately is responsive search ads that have no headlines pinned will only serve one headline. And that's the one of the pitfalls, in my opinion, of responsive search ads is not having the full ability to see reporting. Yes, we get clicks and impressions, but when you look at the combinations of ads that are served, all we're given is the impressions. That's great, but frankly, I don't really care. I want to know what's being clicked on and what combination is being clicked on. So in this example, I'm wanting to know what the best CMS builder is, right? Putting a brand name in a non-branded term is not a good idea unless you're pinning headlines and you want to include it in position 3. Typically, we see position 3 show less than about 5% of the time anyway. So that's why it's important to have a good variety of keywords that match the non-branded. Even a dynamic keyword insertion on a headline can absolutely help. Here's a good example. I like this site link extension, choose the right CMS, right? Because I'm researching, I would consider this. But the headless CMS, I'm not looking for a headless CMS. I'm just trying to find the best builder, which is likely going to be, I'm going to be doing it or someone on my team is going to be handling this. Same thing down here, flexible CMS for developers. This does not match up, and having that filter on of yes, running ads all day long, I wouldn't click on either of these. I scrolled right past them. So details, details, details. And when you go to build those ads, you have that ad strength. Just a vanity metric, in my opinion, from Google. And over the years, I've never seen ad strength impact click-through rate or have any correlation. So take that with a grain of salt, but absolutely make sure the keywords we're bidding on match the headline, match the landing page. Kind of just back to basics there, if you will. This is another big one question that we get is, should I pin headlines or should I unpin headlines? Now, there's really two ways to do this. Like I mentioned, is having all of your headlines unpinned, making sure that you've got obviously your branded and non-branded, your non-branded terms sprinkled in with a non-brand ad group. Same for your branded, and then a good mix of CTAs. So get a demo now, contact us today. Any of those pieces, making sure you have a good variety of those pinned in position 2. Now, if you are pinning ads, you'll have those in 2, and then the keywords that you're bidding on in position 1. You can leave 3 open, but that's typically, like I mentioned, where you would put your brand name. But if the keyword matches what you searched, and then we have a CTA that follows, that's typically what we see perform really, really well. Now, if you're going to unpin, so you have 2 RSAs, one that has a pinned version, so you may have 5 headlines in position 1, 5 headlines of varieties of CTAs in position 2, and then you can leave 3 with a few different versions of your brand. The unpinned version of your RSA can have, I would use caution with having CTAs, because we can see here, or even branded terms, is only one could serve. Now, it wouldn't really make sense if there was just a CTA and one headline. So typically, we would just have a wide variety of non-branded terms of the keywords we're bidding on, because if just one headline shows, it will still match the term that was searched. And then the biggest one here, and we've spent a lot of time chasing quality scores to try and get these up. But the 3 components are the ad relevance, the landing page experience, and expected click-through rate. You can't manipulate expected click-through rate, but you can manipulate the prior 2. But ultimately, that third one is dependent upon the first 2. If you have good conversion rates, you have high click-through rates, very likely you'll have a high quality score, and Google will reward you for that by giving you a lower CPC. Now, that's one area to try not to get too hung up on, because we run successful campaigns that have 2 and 3 quality scores. I mean, that's okay if we have good conversion rates, a good amount of leads, and then ultimately deals that are coming out of that. But if you have low quality scores, high click through rates, high conversion rates, don't sweat it. That's totally fine. But if your quality scores are poor, and you're not getting anything out of it, then it's definitely time to look at each of those components and at least try and manipulate expected click through rate and your landing page experience. So we've got a question here. What's the best approach to running competitor keywords? Is it okay to mention the competitor's name in the headline? In some cases, yes. I would say overall, no, because you could get flagged, right? If the name is trademarked or anything like that, or whoever's running the campaigns on the opposite side sees that and flags the ad. But I would not recommend mentioning the competitor's name in the ad. And then even through to the landing page, what we see work really well, and I'm sure you've all seen this, is a comparison matrix. But even then, don't call out the competitor. It's never a good idea to bash the competition. You can say like the other guys or the rest of them and your brand and kind of all the check marks that you offer versus the value props that you offer versus the competition doesn't offer. But I would not recommend calling out the competition's name in an ad copy. Another question, using a subdomain for the landing page will impact the quality score and other metrics. So I have never seen using a subdomain impact quality score and metrics. Like I said, just as long as those three components, your ad relevance, landing page experience, are good, your expected click-through rate will follow. But I have never seen using a subdomain impact quality score. So long as that experience is being delivered on and it's seamless, then you should have good quality scores. All right, moving on. Now, these are the components. I've got make or break here. These 4 components, I've seen any one of them completely tank a search campaign, starting with negatives. Now, I would urge every one of you after this presentation to go through all of your negative keyword lists, and I am 90% certain you'll find something that either doesn't belong or the match type needs to be changed. This is something that we follow religiously. I mean, every other day we'll go through our search terms report because, in my opinion, if you're consistently serving ads for the wrong search terms, even if it's a few amount of impressions and you're not getting clicks, you'll say, well, I'm not paying for them. But the flip side, the other side of that coin, is your impression share. When you look at auction insights and every time your ad is eligible to show versus how many times it had for an irrelevant term, you're giving the competition a leg up from an impression standpoint. So even though you're not getting a click and being charged, you're still serving an ad when you shouldn't be. And again, that impacts everything down the line. Even if it's 20, 30, 40 impressions a month, at the end of the year, I mean, that's a huge part of impression share, especially when space is so limited, especially when we're coming into election time. The inventory is going to be much smaller. CPCs are going to be much higher. There's just a lot of pieces that go into that can negatively impact your campaigns. Primary conversion actions. This is another big one. And we've seen plenty of times where a lead form submit or a demo request is weighted the exact same as a content download or a newsletter subscribe. Those have their place, maybe on a retargeting campaign for social or an RLSA. But if you have campaigns with primary conversion actions where all 4 that have a completely different weight are optimizing towards the same goal, that's going to negatively impact results, because getting a submission on a newsletter or a content download is significantly, I'll say, easier than getting a hand raiser for a demo request or contacting sales. And once the platform sees that one conversion action is firing, it's only as good as we program the system to be. So Google's going to think, wow, this is converting really well. Let's continue to show ads for users who are likely to convert on a newsletter. Well, that's not the goal. Again, back to paying what are going to be some of the highest CPCs that we have to get someone to sign up for a newsletter. Yes, that's great. We have their email. They can go into a nurture workflow. The direct response channel is capturing that micro moment in that time of need. So make sure that all your primary conversion actions are assigned, going through all of your settings and saying, okay, this campaign is optimizing to this goal. Audience exclusions. So by default, Google Ads will create all converters for you. Now, with a search campaign, the thresholds are different than, say, a display or video, where you need at least 1,000 users in an audience for the exclusion to take place. One thing that you can do to get around this, to get a bigger audience, is combine competitors and current customers, open opportunities, or any leads that have come in. Those four audiences, and again, they have to be contacts. The other thing to take note of there is if it's not a Gmail or a G Suite email, Google can't match that to like an Outlook, for example. So making sure you have a very large audience for exclusions is going to help not show ads to current customers. That's one that we've run into before, where customers will perform a search and then try to log in. So that's one piece to exclude from your existing search campaigns. Your landing pages. So this is a big one that I'll cover as well in a minute, but really understanding what assets do we have to deploy. Don't drive traffic to service pages. Don't drive traffic to your homepage. I mean, I've seen that one plenty of times. The landing page is, again, we're paying for that high CPC. Let's send someone somewhere to take action or serve them up their gated content in a retargeting campaign on social of some sort. But use landing pages for everything. Now, we've got our build done. We've done the research for our keywords. We've written our ads. Now it's time to turn everything on, right? And if you've been running for a long time and you have that baseline, that's much easier to pivot and make changes, adjust ad copy, or change landing pages and things like that. But establishing a baseline of what your primary KPIs are that you're going after, so that hey, my current cost per lead is $1,000. I'm creeping up on $1,500, $1,800. Let's maybe call a timeout on this campaign and reevaluate. Did I go through my negatives? Did I check the ad copy, and do I have good click-through rates? Is there a high conversion rate but just not enough volume? That's really where that fun answer in marketing is, it depends. So if you find yourself consistently struggling to generate leads for non-branded terms or even competitor terms to try and siphon some traffic, maybe that campaign has run its course and it's time to just pour gas on the fires that are working. But again, if it's back to where's that pain and suffering, maybe search isn't the channel to be deploying the strategy on. So we have a question here: how to control lead quality on Google search other than audience exclusion? Example, LinkedIn, we can exclude job titles, seniority. Is there a way to do that on search? So yes, like I had mentioned, is creating a contact list of current customers, competitors. If you have a contact list of individual job titles that are not a good fit for your ICP, export that as a contact. And again, they need to match a G Suite or a Gmail, and it has to be over 1,000 users. So that would be how I would exclude or try to control some lead quality. But at the same time, if search volume is already limited, you're going to have an even harder time generating clicks and impressions the more you layer on that exclusion. Another thing that I've seen work really well too is demographic. If you know that your specific demographic is within a certain age range, that's one big area that you can exclude even natively. But if you have a contact list of job titles and emails tied that are part of G Suite and over 1,000, you can absolutely layer those in as an exclusion. And then the next big fun one is bid strategies. So typically, what we do when we launch campaigns is we'll run manual bidding, and sometimes switch over to automated bidding. We would never roll it out across an entire account for every campaign. It's more of a slow roll and test one or two high volume campaigns that are turning a good amount of leads, and we're just needing to get that little extra edge of maybe adding max conversions or adding a target CPA to stay within our current cost per lead metrics. Now, typically, manual bidding obviously is going to give us the most control. And if you're using enhanced CPC, that is being sunsetted. You're not going to be able to even add that anymore to campaigns starting October. And then it will be fully sunsetted. Google's going to roll that out across over the next year. So if you're using eCPC, definitely take a look at your campaigns, switch over to manual, or if you have that baseline already, you know what your cost per lead metrics are, test automated bidding. There's all the buzz around AI and how you can layer that into campaigns. AI has been around since 2016 in Google Ads when they first released smart bidding, and the first iteration of eCPC was in 2010. So definitely use that to your advantage, but don't roll it out across an entire account before you're able to actually test it on one or two. So better manual than enhanced CPC. So again, the fun answer there is it depends. Try one, run manual first, set a realistic bid based off of what you see in things like Keyword Planner. If you have SEMrush or Ahrefs, a rough CPC, and turn it on. Don't spend too much time trying to get it perfect where it needs to be, because ultimately we're just buying large masses and information of data. So once you have that information back, you've got a good click-through rate, you have a good conversion rate, well, your bids are probably in a good spot. The other place to really check and see if your bids are in a good spot is your auction insights. Where does your impression share stand relative to what your competition is? And the other metric we like to look at is absolute top of page rate, which replaced position, to just see how frequently are we showing top results on page one. If both of those are strong, your bids are in a good spot. Don't adjust them, because if you do increase them, you're ultimately going to just be charging yourself more money. Then the next one here, as I mentioned on the previous slide, stay on top of negatives above all else. Bid strategies, yes, are important. The right keywords are important, but having a strong negative strategy will literally tank an entire account. All right, moving on to landing pages. So this is one area where there are a lot of different opinions and different tactics that you can deploy. These here, the first five, are really what we see drive large conversion rates. One is short form content. If you have a landing page that looks like a service page, basically the more information you provide or put on that landing page, the more chance you have of showing someone something they may not like. So leaving enough curiosity to get the lead and give sales an at bat. When you're trying to scroll through this whole long page and you have all these different service offerings and different features and values, it's not your job to close the deal on the landing page. It's your job to get the lead and in front of sales so that they can build value around those pay points and talk about all the wonderful features. Yes, you can list some of them out if that is part of your non-branded keyword. If someone is searching a pain point, sure, call that out. But typically, very short form content is what we see work really well. Now, on the form, I understand in some cases we have to include things like country, so leads are routed correctly, job titles, company name, all these different things. But really, anything over 4 form fields is typically when we see conversion rates fall off. So, when you're met with this giant form, it's that kind of psychology of it's very overwhelming. Same thing with short form content. You're like, man, I have to read all this information. Digestible, bite-sized pieces of information and short form with as little as friction as possible is what's going to help with those conversion rates. So there's a question here. How much do you recommend raising bids? I've heard that if we increase bids by more than 25%, Google may revert to learning phase. Is that true? So if you're running manual bids and you're increasing by 25%, learning only happens with automated bidding. So if you're changing your automated bidding strategy with a target CPA and adjusting that target, yes, it will start to relearn. But if you're using manual bidding and you up the bids 25%, that's what the new bid is. There's nothing for Google to learn or try and recalculate. Same thing on the device side, as well as location. If you're bidding up on mobile or desktop and bidding down on the others, that's just what your bids are going to be set at from a manual standpoint. But if you are using automated bidding and you're making changes, yes, there is that relearning phase that Google will have to go through. This is another big one here. The third bullet is removing all links. So, plenty of times we've seen landing pages where you have your logo that links to your website. This was a test that we had recently conducted with one of our clients, and just by removing the link to the homepage and shortening the page to about a third of what it was, getting rid of all the links, we saw a 91% lift in conversion rate in just 3 weeks. So again, the mentality that I have is it's convert or leave. The whole purpose of that page is to capture the lead and give sales the at bat. The other thing that we see a lot is there's a chat, there's the cookie consent, there's a pop up for a newsletter subscription. As soon as someone arrives at this page, they've got to close all these different windows before they can even interact with the content. That's a poor experience. We don't want to create friction or put something in front of someone after we've just got a click that we paid potentially $20, $30, $40 for, and now we're already off to a bad start. Now, one way you can determine this is through heat mapping. So Hotjar is a really great tool that we use all the time. They even have a free version that you can deploy on, I think, up to 30 or 40 pages, 30 or 40 sessions. And that's a great place to start. How far are people scrolling down the page to confirm or deny the changes that you just made? Recordings. This is how we were able to catch users entering on the landing page and exiting on like a pricing page or a blog on a website. So by removing those links, we were able to stop users from coming to the landing page, leaving the landing page, and then exiting the site from a service or a pricing page or another high intent page like that. So super important to make sure that at the very least you have short form, your form is as small as possible, and there are no links to take users off that page. Those three pieces there are a really strong recipe for high conversion rates, because even if you add a point or two in conversion rate, you're not spending any more money. You're simply converting more of the existing traffic that you already have, and is a really great way to help your dollars go a little bit further. So that's all that I have today. If you have any other questions, I'm happy to stick around for the next couple of minutes if there's anything there. And again, really appreciate everyone's time and joining today. Hopefully you got something out of this and some actionable insights that you can take today. But I will stick around here for a minute, answer any other questions. And also, don't forget to register for Demand 2024, which is October 23rd next week.